I promised my students that I would do a second face using a little bit different method than what I did for the first demo. We're going to approach this a little more rapidly and using local color rather than coming in with the blue and then the yellow and then the pink like we did before. So I won't be doing that layer at all. I'll be just diving right in and starting to get some of the local color in here. But before I do that, I need to think a little bit about where my light and dark pattern is. So he is basically side lit from either side here, and he's darker on the very front of his face. There's a little bit of darkness coming down from above there as well. He has a sort of a yellowy green color on the side here. There's green in the background, so that's bouncing up in here and giving that little bit of a shade. He wears sunglasses, and so he took them off for this picture, but he wears sunglasses, and you can see that his tan line comes and stops at the bridge of his nose, and he's got quite a ruddy nose and sort of ruddy down in here. His hair has little light edges on it because it's starting to gray a little bit. Eyebrows aren't very strong. He has beautiful blue eyes, which are going to complement this blue shirt. So I want to keep the blue shirt. Hat's got a little bit of blue-black in it. So those are some of the basic colors. We're still going to be using the same kind of colors I used before. I'm going to use Quin Rose, New Gamboge, Aurelian Yellow, my Cobalt Blue, and probably get into a little bit of either my Phthalo Blue or my Ultramarine Blue, and of course Burnt Sienna. So those are going to be our basic colors to do this with. We won't get all the way today, but what I'm going to start with is these eye pockets and sort of develop the eye pockets and what the shape of those are and sort of how the light goes through there. And then, the eyes will get developed along with that, but not immediately. So let's dive in. I'm going to just move this down here since that's what I'm going to be working on, is that eye pocket area. So this face is going to get done in pieces. Let's start with this Quin Rose, but Quin Rose is way too bright by itself. Water over here just a little closer, get my rag a little closer, get that pencil out of here. So it needs to turn a little bit orange, so I'm going to add a touch of New Gamboge to it. And then if that's still too strong, putting some of the opposite color in here, a little bit of Cobalt Blue, will tone that down. That's going to be pretty good, I think. And then I have a little bit more yellowy color to some of his skin. So I want a little stronger yellow. And boy, that red got in there pretty fast. Let's throw some more yellow into that. And even more yellow into that. And then I'm going to throw some Burnt Sienna in there. So that one, get that up on there and thins it down. Is that going to be about the right color? A little more Burnt Sienna. Still keep it way in the yellow range of things. I'm going to put just a touch of Cobalt Blue in there. Tone it down. All right. So it looks pretty bright, but that's okay. And then I have a neutral gray mixed up here. Ooh. Let's add some Burnt Sienna to that. Yeah, that'll be nice. So that's a nice dark brown. And then of course his blue eyes. So where do we start? Let's start with a little bit of the lighter color here. So this sort of yellowy color. So I'm just going to build that space around his eyes. I believe that's all I'm going to, because there's a change in plane right here. So I can sort of soften that as it comes across through there. And so that becomes sort of a break in what I'm doing. Remember, I can always thin this down, make it a little lighter. I just want to get some color on here and then play with it from there. And then under the eye. Bring it down and onto this area here. He's got some very interesting wrinkles. Let me just bring this right on down into the cheek here just a little bit. Thin that just a little as it goes over that eye. And then we're going to soften it as it comes onto this cheek. And that color can just go right over that edge lightly. And the value of this side is quite light, so I need to be careful that I don't get that too dark on this side. So I'm just sort of coming in there lightly. There's a highlight on his nose. I've got the line drawn here, so we're going to stop sort of right where that highlight, well, sort of where that highlight is. And let's get these before this starts getting funny lines in it. He's got a lot of wrinkles, which is not a big deal, but okay, so I need to be careful how much of this I get wet, because if I get too much wet, I'm going to end up not being able to control it. And I think that's about where my lines are. Now let's get some of this red tone in here. And it's going to work its way down and onto his cheek. Works into that dark space right there. That's what that was for. I'm going to lift a little bit right in here. And then it gets darker right in this eyeball area right there. So I'm going to just drop a little bit in there. I also need to maybe lift that top area there. Okay. So that comes across and into his eye. It's got to work its way down and into those wrinkles before that turns into something ugly. A little darker space right up by his eye here. So I put just a little paint in there and then let it come on some of those wrinkles in toward the eye. So this is all still quite loose. It's darker right down the bridge of his nose. It sticks out just a little bit. So just sort of seeing what that shape is as it works its way along is important. And I'm going to soften this edge just a wee touch. Bring that up and onto the rest of his nose there, so we've got that pulled in. It's going to be lighter up in that nostril, and then let's get some of this reddish tone down into, don't get too much on my, and we'll just bring it up to the top of his mustache. A little bit of yellowness at the top of that mustache. just pull some of this down into that mustache without getting too carried away with it, because he's got some white hairs in there as well. That ruddy color on his skin. We'll get these sort of the darkness in those cheeks put in later. I'm not going to worry about that just yet. We'll come back and I'll work on that in another layer. But I do want to sort of know what happens up here. And this is lighter, and there's a light area right on the edge of his nose that I want to leave out. And this is going to get darker back in the side of his eye. I've done something here that I didn't want to do. Came over a line that I want to keep light. Okay, there we go. This just comes up beside the eye. And actually I can bring it right up onto that eye a little bit, even up onto the iris a little bit. And then it's going to be stopping as it comes to parts of this eye. So I'm going to just stop it with lines there. Some very interesting shifts here in light and dark on his face. Now we're getting into a little bit more of that yellowy tone. I can come right up onto that eye and yellowy tone all the way across through there. So this is just a roadmap of color that I'm putting down to start with, and we'll come back in and build this up. Wanting to follow my brush marks with the contours of his face and the wrinkles on his face. So anywhere that there's a hard line, that's a perfect place I can stop with a color. And then if it ends up being hard, that's fine. So that's one reason why I wanted to stop sort of at this cheek mark. And this is pretty light right on that edge of his face, so I don't want to get that too dark now. I can always darken things down later if I need to. But where it's fairly light, we want to keep it fairly light. And I've almost got this too dark here already. Let me just lift a little tiny bit of that. Okay. This red tone can come into this shadow up in here underneath of his hat. And it's going to find its way into some of that yellowish color. But not quite this yellow. We don't want to make him look jaundiced. We want to just make him look tanned. And some of these brush marks are fine to leave behind because he's got a very rugged face. And a rugged face looks good with some brush marks on it. Some little oozles. And so I need to make a little bit more of this red-brown up. That was Quin Rose, Cobalt Blue, and New Gamboge. get that close enough? I think so. I hope so. I've got to get that line out of there right now. We can't have that hard line there. It's the shadow side of the eye, but I can't have a hard line there. Okay, the yellowy brown, and some of his mustache is light, so we need to be careful that that stays. And then bring that in, his shape around his chin, and some of this goes on down into his throat. It's all a little darker than the face up above. And once again, mustache. This comes up to the edge of that mouth. And I've got to be careful that this doesn't stay quite this dark. It's a little too intense, but it can come right up into this mustache here and maybe a little above there. I've got to soften the top edge of it. All the way across here, this edge has got to be soft. It's going to come into the lips above there, but let's see, and that can come in, and then we've got a little light area at the bottom of that, so just let that be. Starting to get oozles here where I don't want them. This is a relatively smooth area on his face, one of the few. Keep that light spot, Margaret, don't lose it. And let's see, underneath of his Adam's apple is relatively light. And then we start getting into more of this red, ruddy skin below this. And it's going to be shadowy in there. I can do a little lifting if I need to make things a little bit lighter if it turns out that it seems like we need to do that. I'm just going to go right into that shadow of the shirt just a little bit, and I'm going to find the edge of this shirt. It's going to be shadowy down into there. That has to join and be soft. And then this pinky color gets to come up onto his ear. Get that outer edge there pretty light. Another light line right here. It's pretty rough looking right now. It's going to take another coat or two to really get this working. But this is giving me the roadmap of where my colors are going to be going. I can put some of this brown in here. Let me put a little bit over on the other side too. I'm liking just getting that feeling. And this side, it can be a little more red-brown. Almost use a bigger brush in this area, but I already got the paint on this one, so I guess we're just going to finish up with this brush. Dried enough in that face area. I need to go, this has to be lighter all along this ridge. I wanted to see if that was dry enough, because if it's not, then it's not going to lift nicely. Dry end of this rag, make sure it's a dry end. I think I'm at the point where I'm going to stop on this. Yeah. I know the other thing you want me to do. You want me to get those eyes in, don't you? I'm wanting to get those eyes in as well. So let me go ahead and I'll get the eyes pretty much in. So am I going to do cobalt blue, or is this going to be a phthalo blue and burnt? Let me just try making a couple mixtures here. Phthalo blue with burnt sienna in it makes a really pretty green, green blue. Those are pretty strongly blue, but they're not cobalt blue. Okay, that might be the color we want. Okay, so there's highlights in his eyes. We don't want to lose those highlights. I'll start with and I'm going to put the irises in, or the pupils in later, but let's just start with and this is a little highlight there. There's a little highlight here, and there's a little highlight over here. Okay, so now the rest of this can get painted in. His eyelashes are going to come in and across the top of that. Now it's going to get a little bit darker at the top here. And a little bit right at the very bottom here. And a tiny bit right there. Okay, leave that alone for right now. I will come in and do the eyelashes across the top, which will help tie that top of that eye together. Now his other eye, where are those highlights? Because that's my crucial. We've got to keep those highlights. And then there's a highlight right over there. And a little dark behind it. Okay. So this whole thing of getting an eye to look like it's see-through is a little bit tricky, but I like to do this, sort of put the color on, and then once it's 3/4 dry, come back and lift a little light out of there. And then this one, it had to dry just enough that, okay, so it's dark all the way across that top. Get that brown. We're using my my brown mixture here for the dark. All the way across the top, and a little bit dark right here on the bottom. And then it's dark on this side, and there's a dark spot in the eye right in this corner. Same with that corner, there's a dark spot. He's got lashes that are going to come down and find that. And is the other eye dry enough now that I can put some of those dark lashes across here, because we need them. And there's a little dark spot in that eye there. And of course, there's other dark things that are going to happen here that'll help make those eyes come together. All right, so now that this is dried some, rinse my brush, dry it 3/4 of the way, and I'm going to lift a little bit of light out of this lower area where the light sort of bounces through the eye, and maybe just a tiny bit up there. We have a little bit of blood vessel that usually is visible right here on this corner. Okay, so he has a wrinkle. We need that to be slightly red-brown. So wrinkle in his eyelids that comes through there. It's going to be dark right in through this area here, and dark coming across through there down into this line here. It's too light, and this can ease off and go up into here. He's got an eyebrow that isn't much of anything. Pupils. His pupils are black. I'm going to ultramarine blue with my brown shade here to get a nice black. Now his pupil, that highlight cuts into the pupil, so there's a little bite out of that pupil where that highlight is. And same with this one, that there's a little bite out of that pupil. We need to tone down this white here. And he's got the same thing where all this skin coming off of the eyes, this comes and wraps around, goes out into these wrinkles. Lovely, interesting wrinkles. Shift here and his skin. I'm adding just a little bit of blue in there. Same within here, we can add just a little blue in here. These eyes are going to need a bit more work to sort of work through the wrinkles, so I probably should let that wait. And I also need to be careful that these wrinkles, they're like little folds in cloth, so they should have a hard edge and a soft edge. And so I want to soften down one edge of that. Find out which one it is. To me it looks like it's the top edge folding down. And okay, we've got to get a few more of these wrinkles over here, which now have a little bit of that goldy color to them, and they wrap over, so they're finding the shape of his face here. Come off of this little area here. And yes, these guys can get some of this goldy tone to them too. Nice. This will need more work. It's not done. I'm going to have to come in and crisp up some of these things. But for right now, this is going to do it. Some things that just, I feel like if I don't get them in, they're going to be bothering me. So that little bit of pink across his lip there, and then it's light at the bottom of this, so I've got to lift this at the very bottom, keep that from getting too dark. Time for me to stop. I'm going to step away, turn this off. We'll finish it up next week. But roadmap with the local colors rather than coming in with that shadow tone. So there's quite a bit more shadowing I still need to do in here, but I'll build that up with more local color.